On January 29th at 7:55 p.m. in Dalnegorsk, Russia, a silent object, described as a reddish spear, flew over the sky and crashed into the Izvaka Mountain, or Hill 611. As the object passed over, dozens of Russians would witness the event and the strange way the object crashed. All witnesses reported that the object jerked or jumped somewhere in the range of 2 to 4 times before eventually dropping like a rock. Then, the object burned intensely for about an hour. Still, as fascinating as this event was, perhaps what's more interesting is what happened after the event. 8 days after the UFO crash at Hill 611, on February 8, 1986, at 8:30 p.m., 2 more yellowish spears came in from the north. Reaching the site of the crash, the UFOs circled the site 4 times before turning back to the north and flying away. Then, around a year and a half later, on November 28, 1987, at 11:24 p.m., 32 flying objects appeared from seemingly nowhere. There were hundreds of witnesses, including the military and civilians. These objects flew over 12 different cities and moved noiselessly at an altitude between 150 to 800 meters. Surprisingly, no eyewitness actually thought that they were UFOs. Those who saw the objects assumed they were aircraft involved in some disaster or falling meteorites. Yet, as the objects flew over the homes, they created television and radio interference. In the ensuing days after the initial January 29th crash, expeditions would form to investigate the wreckage. The first was Dr. Valeris Bulini, who arrived at the site 2 days after the crash. Since the crash occurred in the winter, deep snow was covering much of the area. But at the site of the crash, which was located on a rocky ledge, there was no snow. All around the site, there were smoky-looking pieces of a metal-like debris, with some sprayed-like in the form of solidified balls. At the edge of the site, a tree stump was found. It was burnt and emitting a chemical smell. The objects collected at the site were later dubbed as little balls or tiny nets. Closer examination of these revealed very strange and unusual properties that the elements were not from this earth. One of the tiny nets contained torn and very thin threads, around 17 micrometers. Each of these tiny threads consisted of even thinner fibers which were intertwined. As Soviet scientists began to analyze the material, they realized it was extraordinary and not of this earth. To help better understand what they were dealing with, scientists melted the material inside a vacuum. Strangely, some pieces would spread over a base, much like butter being melted on a stove. However, other material would form into balls, and around half of the balls were covered with convex, glass-like structures. Interestingly, the tiny nets recovered were almost indestructible, with multiple tests being performed, such as submerging them in strong acids and organic solvents. Some have called the crash the Roswell incident of Russia. Like Roswell, there were a number of witnesses to the event, but the evidence doesn't appear to be publicly available. At Dalnegorsk, various evidence of alien remains were reported to be found, but never substantially proven. Furthermore, Surrounding rocks had deposits of a silver metal, which was later determined to be common lead. The site itself has been reported to have high levels of electromagnetic activity, causing planes to avoid the area. Still, believers in the crash will point to the variety of eyewitnesses who saw the crash, albeit often with different reports. Dr. Zulini, a biologist by profession, went on to publish numerous articles on the event and dedicate his life to studying ufology. His conclusion was that it was a malfunctioning alien space probe that crashed into Hill 611.